I was woken up at nearly 6 o'clock in the morning. I opened my eyes to see my mom. Before saying anything, she takes me to the car and puts me inside along with everybody else. Then I remembered, it was Friday, the day we drive to Florida. I fall back asleep for another 2 hours before waking up. To spare some time, I'll just cut to when we get there. We arrive at our resort in Florida on Saturday. It was supposed to be only a hotel, but we take a right to the entrance, and it almost looks like a private neighborhood. The security guard let us in, and we got our key at the main resort. When looking around, there were so many houses and huge apartments. There were apparently only hotel rooms for the resort. We got back in the car to go to our hotel room for the next week. I was given a map. The whole thing was huge. There were pools and tiny little houses and huge complexes and golf courses. Each of the houses and hotel rooms were in different villages. Our hotel room was in the East Village. We drove to where we were going to stay. We were on the 6th floor, the top floor. We got into the elevator and to go up to our room. When we opened the door, it was almost like it were a normal apartment that you would buy. There were 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a balcony that looked over the village. We unpacked our stuff and drove for about 30 minutes. We were going to Universal Studios. When we got there, it was at max capacity. Obviously, my parents were furious. The next day we went back. It was less busy. We also had annual passes, but to get them, we had to buy a parking space. Luckily, the thing to pay was broken, so she for some reason let us through without having to pay. When we got to the park, we got our passes, so we didn't need to pay to park. It was super excessive. There were so many restaurants and roller coasters. The thing I was most annoyed about in the park is the fact that everything was super expensive. We managed though. The first thing we wanted to do was go over to where all the Harry Potter stuff was. As we were walking over, we saw the huge Universal Studios globe spinning over the water. Got over to where the Harry Potter things were supposed to be, but it wasn't there. I walked behind a wall and saw the entrance, just like in the books and the movies. The bricks moved out of the way to show Diagon Alley, the Wizard's shopping alley. It was filled with shops and toys, and there was a dragon on a building. We walked over to the dragon. It was a ride. Our family rode it. It was very fun, but my sister despised roller coaster rides, so she was the only person who hated it. After the ride, we went over to the wand shop. My siblings wanted to do this thing called the Wand Chooses You. It was this thing where instead of choosing your wand, you get a random wand. You could change it afterwards, so it was fine. After that, we bought our wands, and we walked out of the store and we went over to the train station. We rode it towards the next town, which was called Hogsmeade. The first thing we did when getting there is get this thing called butterbeer. It's basically this drink that has soda and ice cream mixed together. After that, it was getting boring, so we went home to our hotel. The next day, we went to the water park of the Universal Studios, which was called Volcano Bay. The thing I most liked is that I didn't have to constantly wear my mask while I was at the water park. I went on slide and ate some snacks there, but otherwise it was mostly just the same as the normal water park. The next day we went back to Universal Studios, but this time we went over to the Islands of Adventure Park. That was the part of Universal Studios that had huge coasters and no tiny rides. I spent a lot more time there than I did anywhere else. For the rest of the trip, we basically went back and forth between Universal Studios and Volcano Bay. A couple of days later, it was our last day of going to Universal Studios, so we went back to Volcano Bay. I did the same stuff as I did on the other days, except for at the end, me, my brother, and my dad went to the top of the volcano at the middle of the park to these 3 colored tubes. What you did is you stand inside of them, they close the chute, and then they drop you down the slide. I was the first to go in. I slowly stepped inside. I could see the water splashing below me. I held my breath, closed my eyes, and then whoosh! I went speeding down the slide. Before I knew it, I was shot out of the slide and swimming. I got out of the pool and waited there for my dad and my brother. I looked at my hands and they were shaking, and so were my legs. That was the last thing I did before going to our hotel resort. The next morning, I was woken up at 8 o'clock in the morning. My parents took our stuff to the car and we put on our shoes and got in too. Then before we all knew it, we were back on the road home. I ended up falling asleep most of the trip. I then woke up. I looked outside to see the house just sitting there. We woke up my siblings and went inside. We then fell back asleep to wake up to our last day of fall break.